here we are. Welcome, everybody. This is Neuropa.
What's up?
Yeah, what's up? Hi, everyone in chat and elsewhere in the present and the future and the past. Welcome.
In the first episode, well, not the first, but like in the episode of season 4 of Simpsons, Duffless, that Homer Simpson reveals his license plate, his ID, and it shows his birthday, and it makes him 36 years old. Homer Simpson's 36.
I'm not exactly sure what that means, except 369, but
It's kind of weird to me. Well, this is Neuropa. This is the golden web. This is the picture. I hope you guys are excited. We have a whole bunch of topics today. We're going to start with Chirons. Maybe we should go there just first. What's this all about?
yeah, so kindly everyone only watch this if you're in a very good mood or if you are 100% convinced that the ET archons are not secretly controlling the entirety of this reality, because otherwise watching this can very easily make you depressed. At least that's how it was for me. So this once again is uploads by Tommy Rogers, who actually, which is why the second tab won't work, received a strike for the third part of it, which I find fascinating because all this guy does is show some images and then mainly, as you can see here, talking and just showing the text about what he's talking about. I can tell you it is highly interesting because I'm sure many of you are familiar with Jordan Maxwell and how, you have the birth canal and the money flows between the banks and the doctor is, receiving you into this life, all the Admiralty law, money magic, and electricity connections. And in Chiron's last, The Golden Web, there's especially these electricity harvest matrix connections being made, tied into the English language. And at least according to his research and what he's presenting, it really does appear as if almost every single relevant word and expression is coded. Now, the open question is, of course, which he states, is that whether or not this means that we are secretly controlled by some, whatever it means, alien etheric source, and therefore the language is modeled like this, or, which I can only hope so, nobody really knows about the mystery of death, and the controllers of this matrix merely constructed the English language to make it appear as if they would know, or if you can catch my drift, cast a longer shadow than they actually are tall, right? But it is truly amazing. This documentary, I think I got through the second part as well. You can easily find the third part on Rumble, again on Tommy Rogers' channel. Maybe later I'll update the link list, but it should be easy enough to find. And the first two parts are here, and they are deep enough, I would say. Yeah, there's too many examples. Maybe you want to skip into one of them, just wherever the text is, and we can just read 2 or 3 sentences of it. Okay, here it's talking about something Hebrew.
Let me jump back a little bit to see if okay, so the spine is the intent. Let me see if I can also do a speed. Okay, that's the leader. The spine is the antenna that receives the electric signals so that we believe this matrix reality to be legitimate. It's also shown in the Hebrew language where Seder also means message dispatch spine. We receive the messages of the matrix through the antenna known as the spine, which also dispatches messages back to the mainframe computer to relay the necessary signals that formulate the code that our brain will then decode in this reality. The spine antenna is a receiver transmitter that sends electrical signals up to our brain so that the brain can process the code and enable the senses to respond to the input of the electrical stimuli that is being sent from the mainframe matrix computer of Saturn. This is shown by the Hebrew word meshosha, that translates in the English as antenna aerial feeler. The spine is the antenna that sends the electrical binary signal that acts as our feeler for the 5 senses in the false reality. It's like a Dr. Bronner's bottle.
So the basic assumption here is that, there is some type of Saturn moon matrix, which others have spoken about, with too many references that I could recount all of them here, but also related to this idea of David and, the savior, Jesus Christ as the savior, and all of this being some type of ritualistic idea to build up electrical charge.
Right.
It also explains the importance of the opposition using matrix references, that a somewhat organized opposition is actually required to build up the charge and eventually bring about the reset. And when you have a full house, like in poker, the only thing that can trump it is a royal flush, flushing the system or flushing everything down the toilet. So again, I cannot vouch for the validity of the backstory, and maybe the best thing to do is just watch it and be neutral on anything here that is speculative. However, the word magic correspondences, both with English and apparently also with Hebrew, and he's even including quite a few other languages, even some Hungarian and some others, seem very interesting, and at least some of them had already been presented by the likes of Jordan Maxwell. But again, it goes so deep and so complex that you really feel like there is nowhere you can turn, no expression you could use without tapping into their lore, let me say, and this idea of electrical harvesting. That's the best way, I guess, I can put it, referencing the Matrix. Yeah, so it's a deep dive. If you're in a good mood, like I said, you can check it out. But I think it's worth it because it makes you take a different look at the language, for sure.
So yeah, also then in the next part of this is the history section. We're going to the Giza Plateau pyramids are a hoax built in the 1700s to 1800s.
This is another upload by Tommy Rogers. Apparently there is not too much great information here, except maybe that you can see in the beginning, what scribbles are being put there. However, I know that David Hume Jr. just released a new book about the hidden history of the pyramids. Spoiler alert, according to David Hume Jr., big surprise, they are built much more recently than even your wildest imagination may conjure up. And also, according to David Hume Jr., they may well, in a sense, be the foundation of what we would call the New World Order, which in a sense is unsurprising because you do have it on the back of the $1 bill. And at least according to David, it does contain the secret, or it literally is the cornerstone of the New World Order, upon which many other things then are built upon. Of course, the pyramid also has the one eye symbolism. What it always makes me think of is the Camel cigarettes, where you have the pyramid in the back as well.
Mm-hmm. And the camel's the Gimel.
Gimel?
Gimel. So the Gimel.
It's a Hebrew letter, no?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So Gimel and the camel. There you go. And it's the camel viewing in the shape of a sideways gimel, if you think about it. And the gimel's also, there's like a whole thing with the eye, you see, meaning camel. So that's why Camel cigarettes are the way they are. There's a whole bunch of other things about Camel cigarettes too because of that. The Turkish blend, but also and domestic blend. But Joe Camel obviously has a phallus for a face, which is the other thing about it's like this there's a whole get David Plate to tell you about Camel cigarettes and the Kabbalah because and originally apparently they were spelled with a K too, which was pretty crazy.
Yeah, which would be like Kamel in German. It's still called Kamel, and one of the most famous high-class restaurants in the center of Austria. Maybe one time we'll go there if someone
Nice.
too much money, is literally called the Black Camel, das schwarze Kamel. I was there 2 times, long time ago.
Crazy.
And of course, the pyramid story is particularly interesting now because you do have Mr. Beast going there recently, And there is the most recent, from what I understand, PSYOP of whatever they now supposedly found underneath the place. I haven't looked into that now, I guess, mainstream information too deeply yet. I'll wait for the next interview with David Jung Jr., which will hopefully occur soon enough, not immediately, but soon enough. And then he'll tell you all a little bit more about this and some of the ideas which he has presented in his newest books. However, it would be cool to, at least for the most recent major reset, get to the root and get to the cornerstone foundation of whatever they're up to. And it's of course also interesting that in general Islamic lore or Quranic lore, you have the Dajjal, the one-eyed idea. And again, I don't really suspect that the lines are completely clear-cut, but still it would be interesting that most of those that have an idolatry for money, what are they worshipping ultimately? The petrodollar or the weapons dollar, however you want to call it, and the main symbolism is the step pyramid with a detached one eye.
Right. And then here is exposing archaeology's dark side. This ancient history for sale.
This is an interesting video. This guy has also done an interview even with Graham Hancock, and he goes to all kinds of ancient sites, and in this particular video has put together a compilation of examples where he has found very recent reconstructions of supposed mainstream ancient sites, where he's explaining, number one, this is also what David Jung Jr. has said, they have simply been remodeled to be very, I want to say cost effective, but tourist trap visitor sites. And
Aesthetically
also,
enticing, yeah.
in very many cases, he can literally tell you that they've been remodeled using concrete. And this always reminds me of the statue which supposedly who was it back then, the Taliban or ISIS, destroyed somewhere in Afghanistan, this big Buddha statue. And if you were to look close, I guess the images will be more difficult to find, but I think they're in David Jung Jr.'s books, and I believe I had seen them elsewhere, where you could see the rebar coming out of the statue. And understandably, I still wouldn't want anyone to destroy anything, rather reuse it or put it somewhere as a decorative piece. But you do have many cases where it very much looks like it has just been made to look nice. And also the excavation or the supposed scientific process and archaeological work is not really done in a pursuit of truth and uncovering history, but simply to make the most money. Big surprise. But the cool thing is here, this is not really a mainstream guy, but he has been to many different places. He's done his independent investigations. I also wrote him. Let's see if he's going to reply. Maybe not. But at the very least, you have someone with some kind of reach who is proposing this idea that many of these sites may not be as ancient. I believe he also refers to the idea that, well, some are not, but then others are, which would have to be investigated and validated separately. But at least, for example, for the Sphinx and some other places, he is mentioning that. And he's also pointing out the idea that many people get very emotional and they're so happy to see it and they cry because they believe they're in front of some ancient civilization monument. And while I do assume that these monuments and ideas and places must exist somewhere,
The
most
best ones
likely
are probably in like London, Paris, Vienna, like they're in
that's
little,
also possible.
all the
And
good
most
stuff's in
likely
museums
those
and
that are
cities.
paraded in front of us as such, most likely aren't the real ones. But that's just a basic heuristic in terms of understanding how reality is obfuscated and how we are generally, unfortunately, being lied to.
Chicago Museum fire. Yeah, that's fair. Okay. And then here's the Plan of the Ages by Silas Speaks.
This also relates to ancient history and some of the ideas that David Jung Jr. is presenting, mainly the concept that many of the supposed ancient empires simply are masks for the same force, which, from what I understand, David would also state, especially considering if the Quran and the Bible are simply medieval history books of the family, not to say the mafia, which have little to do with the general population. And that's, I think, just a great supplemental or a great perspective. If someone likes alternative history, it's definitely worth checking out this video. This is another individual that I wrote, and let's see if he's interested in maybe having a discussion, maybe even with you as well, or in whatever form, because he certainly has a very critical and interesting view on history.
Excellent. And then this is the issue with chronology.
Yeah, more into the same vein, somebody investigating and summarizing the work of Anatoly Fomenko. I think I have not seen the whole video here yet, but he's pointing out the basics in terms of how we cannot properly trust, for example, the dating of the Roman Caesars only because somebody's claiming, oh, we have a complete list, therefore we can easily date them. Obviously, if the lists are manufactured and forged, we cannot. So anybody who is interested in the works of Anatoly Fomenko, he does quite a good job of summarizing the basics of it and pointing out why there are so many issues with our favorite Scaligerian timeline, where I'll repeat again, anybody can look up Joseph Justus Scaliger on Wikipedia, and then please explain to me how it is possible that he's the most important individual for modern timelines and discovered the famous figure of Julius Caesar in Roman history. And there he is. And it just so happens to be Julius Caesar, which is the same name as his own father. Yes, believability threshold reached.
Excellent. All right, I'll check this one out too. Ancient Greece hoax interview with Sylvain Tristan.
Yes, I believe I have not seen this one yet, but here again you have Anatoly Fomenko, the question about ancient Greece being wrong, which is interesting to me because, of course, also a lot of what we understand about Earth shape research, at least on the NASA side, they love to refer back to the ancient Greeks. However, if the ancient Greeks are not as presented, this may also shake those foundations, so to say. So another interesting deep dive interview to take a look at. Oh, we have Besançon. Different interesting places. Yeah, this one I haven't seen yet, but I thought I'd put it there so anyone interested, they can go on a roll to have some corroboration to these ideas.
Interesting.
Of course, David's also written a whole book on this, and I'm pretty sure there's interviews about this as well.
Bakelite plastic, the old plastic they made dolls out of in the old
So
days.
here we can combine something interesting. I'm sure I put it on different shows before. There is something really great which looks like this, and this is not Bakelite, but it is Shilajit, which if anyone wants to know, just contact me. I'll let you know where you can get it for an affordable price on Amazon. Basically, you just have to look a little bit, and you can get it much cheaper than if you would buy regular brands, which are prohibitively expensive. And I gave it to a friend recently. He enjoyed it, and then he told me, oh, it really reminds me of Bakelite or Bakelite. So I thought I'd just put it there. I'm sure you know about it, but this is apparently one of the original plastics in the modern timeline.
Yeah, I have a bunch of Bakelite stuff randomly. I have from the 50s and 60s, my like Bakelite rotary phones and plastic phone, like really thick plastic things made out of Bakelite, but also Bakelite dolls and Bakelite jewelry. They particularly the dolls sticks out to me, but Bakelite jewelry and Bakelite pool balls, right? There's all kinds of things that they use Bakelite for. It's a pretty interesting material. Yeah, 1872. The first semi-commercial Bakelite machine. Yeah, I mean, just kind of like classic plastic, resin plastic. Okay, so John Amos Comenius.
This was pointed out to me by Johnny Enoch, whom we've interviewed on a recent Team Rabbit Hole interview together with Julia, and this was merely, we were joking about names. I don't really know anything about this guy, but I just thought I'd put him there because he seems to be one of the Comenius, I believe, is even one of the programs in the European Union for student exchange or something along those lines. So you can make up your own mind whether that makes it more or less likely that this is a real historical individual. Yeah, universal education. Here we are.
So Kamensky goes here because his name was John Amos Kamensky, but his westernized name was Comenius instead of Kamensky. Interesting.
Yeah, I can't say much about him, but he may be an interesting, supposedly historical figure to investigate.
And
This
Ibrahim
guy, this
Traore.
is not really old history, but recent history. Apparently, this individual has taken over which country? Burkina Faso. And for the first time in a very long time has been kicking out the colonial powers and also more or less nationalized the natural resources. Of course, from what I understand now, he may be realigning himself to Russia because I assume, especially in a third world country, you need some type of first world allies with lots of financial, political, and military prowess if you want to sustain yourself as a leader. But what may turn out to be interesting is that if he's not giving away the resources more or less for free anymore, which is, as some understand, the reason why there is military bases of first world countries still all over the place, not to mention even in Germany, but that's an aside. Of course, in many different African countries, you have the, dare I say, French connection. Mainly, I guess, you have many French soldiers everywhere. I guess you have some American and English soldiers as well. And most oftentimes, of course, they are used to ensure that the leaders are in check, and also that if the populace ever dreams of actually profiting from the resources they mine, often in very dire conditions, any revolt would be squashed.
I don't know if science evidence fringe says that he looks like me, but I mean that's cool. Based. I see it. All right. And then Louise Thoreau's The Settlers.
Yeah, so this, of course, is not allowed on YouTube, or they just didn't want someone to upload it. So let's just stick with the still images. Louis Thoreau actually has been investigating Israel and Gaza for many, many years. You can maybe look him up on IMDb, actually, because he has done so many documentaries back from 1990, documenting the struggle between the Palestinians and the Israeli state, and of course some dogmatic settlers. It is quite astounding to watch, and you can tell how the different groups are treating the situation, and of course how you have some ideas of supremacy contained within. Someone in one comment section said, oh, just look at how they are behaving. What I find very interesting is that so many Israelis actually are recent immigrants, and also quite many of those seem to be quite on the forefront of the settler movement and think it is completely okay to quote unquote settle the land, and even, and this is what I find quite astounding and disturbing, prevent Palestinian farmers who may well have been born in the area even to go olive picking. There's repeated cases of this. And at the same time, what you also have, one of the individuals shown in that movie, who is supposedly the grandmother of the settler movement, she talks with Louis Thoreau and she says, well, don't you know they are misreporting everything? And here I will say, I brought this up many times before, there is a Twitter or X channel called Gaza Wood, which shows that yes, some of these incidents very much are made for TV. But then again, we have to ask the question, how many widely publicized events these days truly are real, and how many of them are made for TV like in Hollywood? However, what she says is that it's always just a snippet, and it is not fair to portray the settlers as violent in any way, shape, or form. And what she proceeds to do then, which I find curious, is she goes up to Louis Theroux and she is pushing him, and then she's expecting him to push her back. And she said, and at the end of the conversation, or during it, she says, well, this is what usually happens. So she's suggesting that there is a one-sided aggression. And then when the aggression would ever happen from the other side, in her mind, from the Israeli settler side, this is then taken on film and widely publicized without any context, which I find is a curious idea and could possibly, I do not know, be projection. And at the end of that conversation, she's kind of halfway mumbling and also saying to him, oh, well, I really had hoped that you would have pushed me, which may reveal some background psychological process or not. But anyways, she's claiming that she's never even thinking about the Palestinians and these children. She's only thinking about her children because she is an Israeli Jew, which of course is a very curious mindset. But ultimately, why I'm bringing this up is also because so much of this understanding, of course, is based on the idea that the land is called Judea. And as one of women explains in that documentary, this means it's the land of the Jews from 4,000 years ago. And one guy even says, well, don't you understand? This land has been our holy land even before Mohammed was in third grade. I don't know if Mohammed ever attended third grade, but this is where it really gets to the core of the issue with alternative history, and to be clear for oneself whether the history is correct or not, because so often history is being used to give an excuse, let me just put it very mildly, for bullying behavior or for any type of supremacist ideology. We have the very same thing in Europe with nationalism and in many other cases. But I think this is where alternative history or a neutral look at history really could potentially, eventually, if people are willing to learn, help to dissolve conflicts, because it would remove this fertile ground for any type of supremacist ideology based on quote unquote history or heritage. And
Right.
also what I
Weaponized.
find interesting, and I believe David Jung Jr. has pointed this out to me as well, and it is a big question, why is nobody properly helping the Palestinians? So for example, why is Jordan and Egypt not simply opening up the borders? This is what I would do, I guess. If I were a neighboring Arab country, I would just be like, well, we have enough space in the desert or wherever, and they're already living more or less in a desert land or a dry land. We would have enough space to settle all of them, and let's just, get this over with and end the conflict. But it very much appears, number one, of course, that the conflict is held up deliberately, and anyone, even from the Israeli side, who would have strong political power to end the conflict is simply removed. At the same time, conflict is fueled. I believe there's even documents stating, guess 3 times who originally funded and created Hamas. And there's even the more recent documentary featuring Israeli Secret Service agents. And I believe they also say something along those lines, that Israel is heavily involved on the back end in just ensuring, just as I mentioned earlier with the electric charge, the opposition remains and can always reform. However, the open question is also whether the so-called Palestinians did something or did not do something potentially even 50 or 100 years ago, and there is some type of multi-generational grudge, whereas they're even today not being helped by other Arab or Muslim countries, which to me is completely insane. Because if I am being punished, not even for the sins of my father, but my great-grandfather, to me that is beyond insanity. But as we understand, especially certain elite individuals do think and plan in generations. So that's another aspect to that story. But I cannot fully explain it yet because I haven't fully figured it out myself. But supposedly they were not aiding someone in a war at some point, similar with South Africa. And that's why still up to this day, their great-grandkids are being punished for it by being kept in a perpetual state of conflict.
Exactly. Yeah. Basically, it seems like out of the Crusades and into the Ottoman Empire, and then their allegiance during the British moving over the Ottoman Empire. They're still being punished for that. I mean, the British are the ones who chose the fate of Palestine, right? And what's this? What DeleteMe and Incognito aren't really telling you?
There's another video I haven't really watched. However, I have seen a similar video before and I kind of know what they're saying. Basically, unfortunately, as every so often, if you find a big channel, a big YouTube channel with some big fancy sponsor, most likely they have too much money to promote whatever they're doing. It may sound good, but it may not be as great as they present it to be, which is why I'm happy that we only have very small time sponsors. Check the description. But in this particular case, what they're saying very simply is that these companies supposedly protect your privacy by contacting data brokers to remove your information. However, there's two issues with this at the very least. Issue number one is, in order to remove your information, they have to be supplied with your information. Red flag number one. And number two is that apparently they have no legal enforcement rights whatsoever. Therefore, all they can do is kindly ask these so-called data brokers and cannot actually guarantee that your information is being removed from anywhere. Again,
But
I would say,
but don't
yes,
they? But don't other companies do have? They don't have a legal standing that you don't have. You could do this yourself. You could ask them to delete your own data. But don't they have to delete your data if you ask them to? I thought that was a law, at least in the United States.
I have heard of something, or I know that something similar exists in Europe where you have the right for deletion, or you can tell them that they need to delete your data, and they have highly complex privacy laws, which are especially difficult to adhere to for smaller companies. And some may argue there it's only being implemented to make business more difficult for smaller companies. But again, from everything I've learned, through this other video I had watched, is that it is not as accurate or not really working as intended. Of course, I don't know the entire backstory, but just
Yeah,
maybe
I'll
take a
look
look
into
at
it
these
too.
videos before you want to invest in such a service. Of course, by today, I doubt anyone really is not being tracked because you have these automated systems everywhere. And even many years ago, there was a scandal, quote unquote, about Facebook having all these like buttons everywhere, which supposedly on the back end were tracking you as well. What you can do is there is a variety of privacy-based plugins for different browsers. PSA number one, I believe, would be don't use Google Chrome. If you want to use it, at least use Chromium, because from what I understand, they are wholesale using your data. And similarly, even with regular Firefox, according to the newest terms of service update, if I understood that correctly, they changed the line from never going to sell your data to,
You heard that ChatGPT wants to buy Google Chrome, right?
yeah, probably
That
a
was
lot more data. But anyhow, Firefox, from what I understand in TOS service, also kind of removed that from never gonna sell your data to maybe gonna sell your data or something like
to
this.
never gonna give you up your data and to getting the data taken. All right, why doesn't the internet feel fun anymore? This is a good question. I wonder about that. Because
Yes.
I have a quick answer for this. It's because Apple fired Scott Forstall. It's because Tim Cook is cooked. That dude screwed up Apple. Apple screwed up. They're super lucky they had so many billions of dollars, trillions of dollars, or whatever it was from iPhones and iPods that they were able to invest in making ARM chips. But other than that, Apple sucks. And when Scott Forstall was in charge, Apple was all about like Aqua and like that's why Apple looked all pretty. That whole GUI thing that happened was because Scott Forstall was all like, we should have fuzzy and liquid and textures and things like that. And when they got rid of him, it was just John Ives shaving off pencil, parts of the phone, like just making the phone thinner and thinner and thinner, making the laptop thinner, just circumcising your laptop more and more and more. That's all that Apple ever did ever again. And that was the death of the aesthetic of the internet, I think. And that whole period, I don't know, that's my opinion.
You can actually see a similar progression in the graphical user interface for Windows. And I learned through stumbling across these videos, and as you know, YouTube then starts recommending you similar things endlessly, about 2000s aesthetics. And it is interesting that in the early 2000s, you had a quite positive, futuristic outlook, and everything was, shades of blue and chrome, and they added the 3D effect to many icons. However, recently, flat design has become a lot more popular. Some would say simply for usability reasons. So you can see
Dude,
the
there
shift.
was like VR chat in the late 90s, early 2000s. You could literally like go on the internet and walk around in a room with someone else, like a video game and chat. I mean, why is this not the way Facebook is? Facebook became like in MySpace already was kind of a HTML page instead of a cool room. They already kind of took it away further and further until it was a bulletin board. But then Facebook's so much worse because it's just this weird, like it's like when you go to the doctor's office and you have to fill out a form. That's what Facebook is. It's just you're filling out forms all the time that say like what this is or that is or where you are or whatever. It's just horrible.
Yeah, so the explanation here is basically that instead of having so many myriad services and strange websites and different forums for any topic, you now simply have a few, they call it walled garden communities. Like today, it would be the big social media giants, which any of you know, and everything is centralized there, which of course makes it very much easier for data collection and any type of surveillance and profiling. However, it takes away the individuality of different sites and also the aspect of exploring something. Although this may also coincide with that internet theory, and as we've discussed before, that now oftentimes search results are repeating, especially on DuckDuckGo. I think you get 10 results, and then you can say, show me more. It shows you 3 more. And on Google, you have repeating results, and it doesn't go any farther than page 42 anymore. And in general, also due to algorithmic change, on at least where I can tell on platforms like Facebook, it has become a lot less interesting because number one, everything is monetized, so you only get reach if you put money into it. And then on Facebook, and I believe also on X, I'm always surprised because I get these supposedly high profile influencer posts all over my feed, whether it's American or it's some kind of African relationship advice, not to even say witch doctor, but apparently anyone, I'm not sure, I guess it's because they're putting money into it, but I never even subscribe to them, yet they're showing up on my feed. However, only because I'm friends with someone on Facebook doesn't guarantee me at all that I will ever actually get to see their updates. And it may be that to some extent you can change that through the settings and maybe reset your algorithm or make some changes to take it back a little bit. However, it seems that you cannot really get this original experience anymore where it was a truly more or less organic linking of ideas. But now again, like I said, everything monetized, centralized, and gate kept, which of course takes the fun away and also makes it less useful, especially if you're interested in maybe more how do you call it, idiosyncratic ideas, or you simply
Idiot.
again idiosyncratic, or again simply you want not idiot, but want to know what your friends are up to, but you're never gonna know unless they put in $100 per month to promote their own posts. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, and then even if you do, I don't think it's good. I mean, it's really what they want to share and they don't want to share. It's the algorithm. So hopefully they sell YouTube next. And who do you think would buy YouTube if Chrome got sold to
Well,
ChatGPT? Who's going to buy
someone
YouTube?
with good relations to Trump is gonna buy it.
Of course, but could that be ChatGPT? Because if ChatGPT owned YouTube, that would be crazy. Because then it could study human media. I mean, just think about how intense that. But I
Yeah, of
guess
course they're gonna buy it. Of course, either
maybe
them
or
or
not.
some sub company which belongs to a holding
Disney.
company, which ultimately feeds the information to
Disney
ChatGPT.
Disney
Actually, you're
should
spot on. It's gonna be someone related to OpenAI for sure.
maybe, but Disney also has a really cool AI lab, right? And crypto token. They have Dragon and all this stuff. So Disney, if Disney bought YouTube, I mean, I don't think they could almost afford it unless they do something really like completely different. But like basically, it would be like a merger of some kind. And I don't know. I'm just trying to think who else could do it. But if Chat GPT buys Chrome, I don't know how they're going to be able to afford to buy YouTube. And would they let them buy both of them? Because if they just destroy one in Monopoly, can they let them both have it again? So it seems like they're more interested in Chrome than they are in YouTube. Somebody else might want. I'm trying to think like, what other companies exist anymore that have that kind of power that are friends with Trump. Like Larry Ellison, Oracle buying YouTube would be crazy. I don't think it's the best situation for anybody at all. Because like he would just like fire the bottom 10% of all YouTubers every year, just like block them from the accounts. Well, all right. So wait, I live 400 yards from Mark Zuckerberg's massive data center. This is what?
Speaking of which, this simply talks about the fallout for local residents if a massive data center is being put up in your neighborhood.
Like pollution? Wow.
I believe one of the things is property prices, and also it may be some sort of pollution, what you see at the beginning, but it's not exactly clear if that's the reason why, but I could well imagine it. At the very beginning, you see the
The
woman
bad water, she's saying.
trying to, well, even just have any water. Like she pulls the water on full and there's almost no water coming out. And some commenters were like, oh, how is that related? To me, it could make sense, especially if the
Liquid
data
cooling,
center
yeah.
is using liquid cooling and a lot of water pressure.
Or
Then it's very
hydroelectric or
possible
something, yeah.
that they don't have much for it. And what's of course also highly suspicious, big surprise, the members of the local town board get payments, and not too shabby payments, even though I would say again, for selling out your community, is it really worth it if you get 30,000 bucks a month or something? And apparently there is no conflict of interest clause there, or it's simply not being persecuted. And it is just, as always, amazing if a few individuals that are in any position of authority are so easily corrupted. They take a tiny bit of money, and then you have quite a few residents that have massive losses, and you do not even care to in any proper way communicate with them, much less compensate them. Because also here I'm wondering, maybe this is just a deliberate, here you can see some of the payments, a deliberate way just to rile up the population and make them angry at something. But I'm really surprised that, especially if there is so much money in the bank for these data center companies, why don't they in some way, shape or form simply pay off those that would be the loudest critics? Not saying that that would make it okay, but I'm kind of surprised that they don't use funds for that, almost as if they want to stir up opposition or people that complain understandably so.
Yeah, I mean George is crazy, right? Like it's crazy how much tech they're putting out there and what they're going to build in the southeast. All the tech that's going to be, I mean, where American phones will be made, computers. Who knows the future there? But people get paid cheap. Top 500 project ranks and details 500 most powerful non-distributed computer systems in the world. Right? Supercomputers.
This is a list that exists for some time. To me, when I was following these things more closely, it appeared more exciting maybe 15 years ago or something like that. Now, of course, you have some of these ultra clusters, and of course, we have to mention these are the ones that are publicly known. So I would
Exactly.
only expect that there are other types of machines, maybe with other architectures, or maybe just vastly more computing power. I'm also kind of wondering what these systems are actively being used for. I only know that quite some time ago there was an effort to do a distributed computing system, for example, for calculation of protein folding, whereby
Hewlett
now
Packard El Capitan does the Nuclear Security Administration. This is the #1 most powerful supercomputer that's declassified on the list.
Nuclear Security Administration. So I kind of want to know what they are really using this computing power for, and if there is anything that benefits the public at large, or it is merely
Well,
there for some huge corporations, surveillance and the like?
I can't be sure, but I would imagine a big part of it would be to keep passwords that are impossible to crack with quantum computers, right? You have to have like the most serious passwords possible, but there's probably other
Yeah, but
things too.
these are not quantum computers, right?
No, but this is something that you would need in order to make a password all the time to keep your system safe. You'd have to have the most powerful supercomputer possible to make extreme hashings. So, I mean, it also probably does other things, but I can imagine that would be like a pretty
But are you
valuable thing.
suggesting, because I don't know the details, that if I have a hash that's, let's say, 10x more powerful than what is generally available, a quantum computer would have difficulty solving it? Isn't the idea that a
It still
quantum
will take
computer would be equally easy for them, let's say?
a quantum computer will take a certain amount of time still because it takes real time operations. So it would still take a period of time. It would just be a lot quicker than if you had. I mean, this computer is so much more powerful than any other computer than only probably 100 or a dozen or maybe like half a dozen computers in the world could even try to decrypt passwords that it created. And any quantum computer that did that, I mean, any computer that tried to do that, it would still take a super long period of time, except for a quantum computer. But a quantum computer, we can't be sure because who knows exactly how powerful they are, but it would probably still take a week or something to break something like this, as opposed to a normal security system that would just instantaneously be broken, right? But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it says here that they were responsible for safeguarding national security through military application of nuclear science. So they could be doing a whole bunch of different kinds of things. They were founded in 2000, so that does make me think that they're kind of a, you know what I mean? If they're built in the year 2000s, like a Y2K kind of a thing.
Yeah. And just briefly, shout out to Kalex, who became a member. It
Yeah.
almost appears, because on my channel, maybe also on your channel, because it's listed twice with
Oh,
one
are you
minute in
remembering
between.
such a hardcore? That's such a cool thing. Whoa.
And
Base.
also there is
Gematria Brigade.
Gematria Brigade. Gematria Brigade. I think that's
Glad to
on your
have you here.
channel.
I like your silhouette. It's a pretty cool Rorschach from Watchmen looking kind of guy. I'm not sure if that's what it was, but maybe it's the shadow. Okay, how video game graphics lost their magic. Yeah, it's sad, dude. Video games were like so good in 2013. Now they're delaying Grand Theft Auto until May 2026, a year from now, bro.
There's many videos about this now, and also there has been this uproar with modern graphics technologies. Also Unreal Engine basically necessitating blurriness and so on. Some people asking if their eyesight is turning bad, but no, it's actually how the graphics are created.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, this is, I believe, the
It's
video
not
which
it's not
is,
Unreal Engine's fault. It's just like people suck now. People suck at optimization. Nobody cares to do optimization. They keep thinking that these like software uh saves that exist, like for instance, upscaling and things like that. Those things are very practical if there's nothing else that you can do. But you shouldn't make that your reliant like show pony. You shouldn't use that as your optimization. That's not optimization. That's like a save. That's something you do afterwards. You're like, oh, and here's something we can do to make it better. And you look at these games now, and nobody cares to do the optimization. So there's these huge files. They look like crap, and then they just say, oh, well, just put some ray tracing on it. It's like, no, don't just put ray tracing on it. I mean, don't you? I mean,
and show me any sub $500 GPU or even more that can even properly do ray tracing on native resolutions without
yeah,
stuttering.
and the nanite
So
thing for sure. Yeah, nanites are cool. Ray tracing is cool, but it's nothing that's going to make your game any better. And it's not necessary to make your game look good. Like, hold on, like just really quickly,
yeah,
ray
he's
tracing.
he's
What's it
also
called?
talking about this.
Cyberpunk.
I
Look at that.
Oh yeah.
Can you look like back and on and off here? Just look at on and off. Okay, so this is what people keep talking about, like ray tracing. So here's right here. Here's ray tracing off. Here's ray tracing on. I mean, is it that much better? Because you're losing half of your frame rate for it. Here's ray tracing off. Here's ray tracing on. Okay, like Okay, is it really is this really that big of a deal? Like, look at it. It doesn't look that
Well,
much
all I
better, like
know, I recently got what is it? Radeon. No, I should really know this. 7600 XT, which is like a medium level card of the now still newest generation of Radeon cards. And even with my previous card, which was an RX 580, which is literally from 2019, I could run Cyberpunk 2077 on 1080p on, I think, medium quality settings with really good frame rates. With the new card, I think I can have it on high quality settings with good frame rates. But as soon as I turn on ray tracing, everything
yeah.
grinds to a halt and it's
Yeah.
unusable.
It just so then look at the game that doesn't have ray tracing. This is old Grand Theft Auto 5, which is funny to call it old, but like this game is 12 years old, right? Like this game came out in
It's the
2012, 2013.
ultimate cash cow with all the online
Well,
transactions they have.
and yeah, for sure, but it is a really, really well made and optimized game. It's like this is why they're waiting a whole extra year to make GTA 6. They're not coming out until next year because they want to make because this game has been freeing a cash cow, like you just said, for 12 years. There's infinite new stories that keep coming out for Grand Theft Auto Online. There's a whole mission here where you join the Church of Scientology, but it's called Epsilon, and then
Well,
you have to like kill the prophet and you make like billions of dollars. It's an insane game. Like there's a lot, and the next game is gonna be like 500. It has to be like 500 to 1,000 hours of missions, because of how big the game is gonna be. So that has to be the the standard for how a game should be, and there's a reason why nobody wants to compete with that. But this is a perfect example of a well optimized game. And again, it was made and optimized for machines 12 years ago, and nobody's doing that anymore. No one's optimizing games properly. It's just really sad because it can be
that,
done. You can
that's
definitely games used to be optimized really well like 10, 15 years. Games with the Xbox 360 is a great example, are so much better than the games are right now, you know?
another great argument by that video I showed previously, which everyone who wants to know. The link list is always below the video. Is actually for readability. So how much of the screen do you actually truly focus on, which is of course a very small segment. All the rest is fluff. And even showing an example, because one company that kind of stuck to it up to this day is Nintendo. They have always been looked down upon because, oh, you're releasing a new console or new game, your graphics compared to what is top tier standard now actually look bad. However, that is not the main point, and also there's something to do with aesthetics. And the guys asking the questions, how many games do you remember, and were they actually attempting a photorealistic vision, or did they have great style? Even with the example of Elden Ring, which has some graphics but still is about style, or many 2D games, which are merely about style, or what is the fun in it? Maybe a big part of it has to do with actually being able to read the screen, understand what's going on. And it's not necessarily about having, I don't know how many thousands of pixels that are rendered to the highest fidelity, which, as we mentioned, only eat up your resources. And my main gripe, actually, with most games overall, is the lack of interactivity. So someone even said that even in the Morrowind or Oblivion game 20 years ago, you could fish or you could put a fish somewhere. And in the newest game, you can't even do that. So then everything looks really nice. And one other example in the video is you have a super high definition, let's say, tool hanging on a wall or on the floor. It looks really cool, but of course you approach it. And since it's not interactive, you can't do anything with it. It's just a graphic, right? Or the idea that it has so dumbed down, similar to the internet idea, that there is no more joy in exploring because everything that can be interacted with is marked with an outline in an exploration game, for example, and everything else is just a fancy graphic that you can't do anything with. So that's my one gripe, interactivity. And the other thing is, let's say, background logic or emergent behavior. There is one video on YouTube which says, I waited 24 hours in every GTA game. And for example, in GTA 3 even, you have individuals randomly getting into a fight and the police or the emergency services arriving, this or that. And then in GTA 4, for example, nothing happens at all. I think GTA 5 is a bit improved again, but here I'm always wondering, why is there so little emergent behavior, especially in open world games, which is, at least to me, what makes any game interesting, if you have emergent behavior and it's not only scripted or only following along and only reacting to what you're doing. Because what you want to do in these games, you want to simulate a living world, or you want to have a story generator. One game here I can always recommend is RimWorld, just because it's only 2D. It's quite detailed, has many mods, and is such a game which is based upon story and emotion and all of that. And that doesn't require high fidelity graphics at all. Because
Dude,
also, of course, we have the imagination part, just like why people say, oh, the book is better than the movie. Why? Because you actually imagined the movie by yourself rather than being presented with a ready-made thing which you may or may not enjoy.
legit. Okay. So then what about Proc Gen Arcana?
Speaking of which, maybe someday, when I'm not sure what has to align, the stars or something else, I will again play a pen and paper role-playing game, which is the idea of sitting together with your friends, simply having a sheet of paper, if that, which is your character, having a few dice, having a game master that simulates the world and the reality, and having a few protagonists. So I thought I have to add this to the link list for anyone who is interested in that, or even just likes to imagine worlds or play around with things. This is based on procedural generation, and it allows you to create maps, here we say for whole realms, cities, villages, and so on, at the click of a mouse, which can be great if you ever either just want to build a world, even if you would, for example, write your own novel and you want to create a world for it. This could also help, and especially for pen and paper role-playing games, or even game development or anything else imaginative, you can quickly generate new maps and worlds, which otherwise, of course, takes up a lot of time.
Welcome to Rapland. That's cool. Interesting. Village generator. Wow, very cool. Okay, and this is called what about Proc Gen Arcana? Cool. All right, and then the don't buy stuff from old AI people.
And just in the vein of being scammed, this is actually a fun video to watch. It's about ads that were popping up somewhere which
Facebook ads with fake
declare
people. Yeah.
that, oh, there is a clearance sale. Look at old Granny. She's been doing this for 70 years and she's about to retire in 3 months. This
Boomer
is the
traps.
very
Yeah.
last stock. And the great thing about it is that you have these real individuals advertising for it and promoting it. However, they are simply paid actors from Fiverr, which this guy even could easily look up and find that this is what they are.
That's
And of course,
amazing.
you're being sold supposedly vintage, high quality handicraft goods,
From
and they
China.
actually are $2.50 Timu goods, or insert whatever
Made from an
super
old
broker
grandpa.
discount
Yeah.
with questionable sourcing, working conditions, and materials. But it's being
That's so
upsold to
good.
you through AI images and a few hired
Ah.
actors.
See, like, these are ideas that I could have, but, like, I can't imagine ever taking myself seriously enough to execute on a scam like this. This is such a ridiculous. How can you even look yourself in the mirror if you're really going around doing this? This is so bad. Oh, but you could totally do it, you know? Like, you could totally be like, "These are grandma's cookies that I ordered for you from, the middleman." This is just so messed up.
And just to shout out, he actually has one sponsor that is, I believe, a data broker contacting service or identity theft. I'm
Aw,
not sure how well these work anyways, but yeah, in any case.
Jesus. Alright. Then Le Jugement des Anges, what's this?
Okay, how did I find this video? What do you think?
Uh, I mean, I guess you were recommended it because it's from an African ministry channel on YouTube.
No, I mean, it would be cool if this is what YouTube thought I was into.
Uh,
No, I was randomly browsing this website I showed a few shows ago called TV.garden or TV
Oh,
garden.
yeah.
Apparently, there's also a radio garden where you can do the similar thing. You know, have your world map
Watch the
modeled as a
IPTV
globe in
streams.
that case, and you
Yeah.
can see the streams. And here I watched some random African channel,
Fully
and
AI
then
animated movie.
it always said, "Oh, le jugement des anges," because of course they speak in French. And I thought, this is pretty cool, but very
Yeah.
much looks like Sora, 8-second AI
Yeah.
animations.
Yeah.
And then I just was curious, all right, I don't know how many people watch this TV show. I really have to check if I can somehow find it. And here it is on YouTube with 2,000 viewers. So I expect that on TV it has more viewers than that. And it does have a pretty cool style, like, Diablo 5, which doesn't exist yet, but that's kind of the vibe I'm getting here. I can't vouch for the validity of the backstories, and it's Bible-based. We know it, medieval history family book, but I just really liked the style, and I thought like, wow, so this is what they are producing for Africa,
Dude,
which I
yeah.
think is kind of cool.
Nollywood's gonna go hard in the future if this is where we're at now, because like the only thing that was holding them back was a lack of special effects, right? So AI is gonna push Nollywood over the top. I love African movies. We need to produce one. It probably costs like less than a car or a plane ticket, even. I should look into this. We should definitely pay some people to make a movie in Africa. That's the way to go. And they can play us. It would be a movie about us starring a bunch of Nigerians based. Okay. Claire Obscure Expedition 33. I just saw that this is a movie, or no, it's a video game. That's right. Epic. It's in the Epic store. I saw this was a game. What's the deal with this game? Is it cool?
I have to say, it is pretty decent. I played some of it mainly because I really do enjoy what they call JRPG games, so basically turn-based games, although it does have some real-time elements which are quite important because you need to dodge or parry at the same time. Otherwise, you cannot even
Whoa.
play on medium difficulty. You will be squashed.
Dang, this is cool.
So
This is like a Final Fantasy kind of thing going on here.
exactly, and it does have like a dark variant of Belle Epoque and pretty interesting art style once again. And the main storyline is that you are starting on an island and there is a paintress, whoever that is, I don't know yet, and she declares every year a certain number, and everyone above that number is perishing on that island, which is called lumière, so light. And you are the most recent expedition, which is interestingly enough called Expedition 33, as if they couldn't have chosen any other number, because I think by that point they would have eradicated anyone above the age of 33.
Hmm.
And you are sailing to the continent, and then there is lots of mystery. You find some allies, you find quite a few scary enemies, but again, the main point here is that the dynamics of the turn-based system I think are quite interesting. You have quite varied characters, so it's something worth checking out for anyone who likes JRPGs, which I do. So the last one, which was interesting here, was actually Octopath Traveler, which I had pointed out as well. Whereas at the end, I'll say it again, your main arch enemy is called Kazan, and you have the swastikas all over the final boss stage. So
Well, I mean, I'm pretty sure this game has to be made in Unreal Engine, right? So it just kind of
I
goes to
think
show
so,
you
actually.
it's a good example. Like it looks like a company that knows how to make a game, and it's not. I mean, it doesn't look bad at all. So again, a studio with these indie studios in Europe that are making games that actually know to optimize the game. That's all I'm saying, man. It can be done in Unreal Engine. You just have to care. Like this looks great. I'm gonna definitely pick this up. I'll look at it. Hey, where did you get? You say like you get game codes, right? Like you can buy. Is that like legal, right? You could buy Steam codes. Is it like a website?
Well, actually, so there are sites, and strangely enough, I recently saw a video about this, and apparently it works like this. So if you do find these game code sites, some of them are using codes that have been refunded and they somehow scraped them or something along those lines. And there are at least a few messages by certain developers that tell you, and it's not me saying this, it's these developers saying this. They're saying before you buy these keys on so-called gray market sites, there's a few sites which are let's say, accredited because they're actually fresh keys and maybe a little bit discounted. But on the more cheaper gray market sites, apparently the developer is losing out because it's like a game code that was refunded and somehow scraped. So what the developers are saying, again, quote, before you buy on the gray market game key sites, we would rather have you pirate our game.
Interesting.
Quote.
Crazy. All right. Interesting. Okay, cool.
Oh yeah,
I'll
and
take it.
also PSA, of course, everyone switched to Linux. Even PewDiePie, maybe I didn't even put it
Oh,
here.
is that not a
PewDiePie made
video
a
on here?
video. No,
Oh,
apparently
that's so
not.
cool.
Yeah, show
PewDiePie
it.
Rising Linux is awesome.
So I just want to say, because of the Steam Deck and
And you know he
Steam
moved to
finally
Japan too.
picking up compatibility layer, so Wine, which is called Wine, is not an emulator. This is the main compatibility layer for Linux to run Windows system calls. You can perfectly run many different games. You can check that out on protondb.com to check whether your game is compatible. And Clair Obscur, Expedition 33, which we just showed, is perfectly compatible.
Very cool that he did Linux. I like that he's living in Japan and that he's doing Linux, right? That's the last. So the first thing I saw was that he made this video 3 weeks ago about him and his family, PewDiePie's family, and that they're living in Japan. I was like already thinking about how cool Japan is and how I want to live in Japan, even though that's just a ridiculous fantasy because people in Japan just work themselves to death and it's not like everything is cracked up to be with the eels. But you know what? Who doesn't love Japan? Look at those cherry blossoms. It's a perfect time. If there was ever a better time to be in Japan than cherry blossom spring season, I don't know what it is, I'll tell you.
Oh, one thing we actually have to look up is maybe just enter it on YouTube. World Exposition Osaka. This was very recent.
Yeah, okay.
And they have a strange mascot.
Let's see. Honest review of the expo. This guy. He looks interesting. Okay. So he went to the Japanese $67 billion Osaka Expo, where our buddy Dietmar was, right? I think he was there.
Yes, and also
Techno.
Also another online friend, and who said it was very badly organized actually for a Japanese event, which is curious. I don't have many more details for it, except that the figure they have apparently has 6 eyes, 5 on the front, and 1 at its rear end or something like this. So a little bit strange.
Right, yeah. Some weird like alien freak creature. So it's like a Burning Man thing and very weird. Whoa. Holograms. Nice.
Great, but I mean, I'm sorry. I saw these almost 20 years ago when I was in Japan, where I also, by the way, saw dancing robots. So here I have to say I am 99.999% certain that the real development is kept far away from the public, because here also it seems there has been virtually no progress in the public sphere regarding robots.
The Japanese are just they're getting old and tired, man. That's what's going on. There are not enough people working on this stuff anymore that want to work, you know? It's Japan. Okay, so the Royal Secret and the Rose Croix.
Rose Croix. So this is a article by someone investigating the Masonic power structure. I think there's nothing too fancy or crazy here. Anyone who has really investigated this may have seen these maps before, but for anyone who has no clue about it, it's certainly interesting to see. You have the connections to all these higher order so-called Scottish Rite Masonry, everything beyond the Blue Lodges, which are the first 3 grades. However, it only truly gets interesting well after that. And then you have this whole system, but we're going to talk about it a little bit more on the next links, I believe. Yes, we are.
Okay, so Conclave.
Okay, this is just in between. This movie was apparently released about 6 months ago. I haven't seen it.
My mom
where
liked it.
You have, where you have a individual being elected to be the Pope, And then here we say laparoscopic hysterectomy. And then after being elected Pope, he has his uterus removed. And this, of course, ties in fair and square to the concept of the hermaphrodite savior, potentially goddess cult, where some people have claimed for quite some time that Christianity actually is a goddess cult. Here we have some interesting translations where I would, of course, argue that it may well be that even these original documents may be manufactured, but still the translations may well stand.
Oh, a new member.
Welcome,
Joe Wallace.
Joe Wallace.
This is cool.
Think I've
Okay,
seen
so
you
I got
around.
Calyx, Gematrix, Joe Wallace. We're doing pretty good here. This is nice work, guys. Nice work. Okay. Central Asian origins, Scythian shamanistic, androgynous practice, random Megan Fox, unrelated. Miley
Oh,
Cyrus.
wow. What?
Looks like some fun times there. All right. Yeah, all right. I'll have to watch Conclave. I tried to watch it, but I got bored. But I'll give it a chance. I just need to give it a chance. That's the problem. Oh, okay, so then this is let me see if I can translate the page for us here. Business masonry, how lodge brothers divide Vienna amongst themselves.
We recently had the election for the Vienna City Council. There is a curious situation in Vienna. However, I assume it's similar for many bigger cities in the US and elsewhere, where the legislature for the land is the same as the legislature for the municipal, because legally they are two different systems. However, of course, if you get elected here in Vienna, you get elected to both at the same time. And ever since the very beginning of the official mainstream history of Austria in terms of a republic, the first republic was officially declared in 1918. And ever since then, Vienna was a social democrat run city, of course, with the exception of the Second World War mustache man regime. And what is curious is that this is a confirmation not only from this website, but also from a recent podcast with a former Mason who has been a Mason in Austria for 25 years. And he's dropping quite a few names, discussing quite a few cases, which is very interesting to listen to. However, what it shows here is that the Vienna mayor is a Freemason, and that also on their voting list, you have the first 10 or 11 individuals, and the Social Democrats, I believe by now, this is their internal regulation, that they always put up one male, one female, because they are so egalitarian, supposedly. At the same time, the guy whistleblowing or interviewed in the podcast says that internally, at least the regular Masonic lodges are not egalitarian at all, because they still don't allow women to attend, and even look at you with a side eye if you do a more or less private event where you allow the women in associated Masonic organizations to attend with an apron or something. In any case, what you have here is the mayor is a Mason, and 5 of the 6 males ranked on the top of the voting list equally are Masons. At the same time, the main candidate for the Black Party, which is the supposedly it's Conservative Party, People's Party in Vienna. This is a former vice police chief of Vienna by the name of Karl Mara, and he's also a Freemason, apparently even sitting in the very same lodge as Michael Ludwig, who now again was more or less confirmed as mayor of Vienna with about 40% of the vote, which is the worst or second to worst voting result. Second place, you have the Freedom Party, which recently won the federal elections, but as I have explained on previous shows, still did not get to enter the government. And here again, you have, they like to call it corridor sanitaire, or you could simply call it a firewall, where they ensure to do anything and everything to prevent the Blue Party or Freedom Party from participating in government, even though democratically one could very well argue, well, you have a first party with 40%, you have a second party with 25%. Why don't they try to get together and find some type of compromise or consensus? Knowing that all the world is a stage, I'm also wondering if this is not done deliberately to build up even more resentment or whatever else the long game is. But it certainly does not appear to be very democratic, because if I consider myself to be the steward or interested in a democratic system, I would want the government to have the largest possible approval and representation of the voters' will within the government, of course, that they should be steering policy. However, instead, what you will have now is 40% of the Social Democrats, and then 11 or 12% of whatever small time strange party as an add-on. And since Vienna has been ruled by the Social Democrats for so long, you can expect how much influence this second party will have. Probably very little, as has been exemplified by the previous Viennese administrations, where you had the Green Party and then the Liberal Party, but they didn't really get to do anything, because it's not only the city government, you have all the city services which are run by the government, you have the hospitals which are run by the local government, all the nurses and so on. And you have, the guy who's picking up your trash. And then what you have is you have all sorts of educational institutions and other organizations, which are also more or less known to be courtyard organizations or court, I'm not sure how you would call it in English, but basically attached to the party just as well. Hooray for democracy.
Well, we'll have to see the future of European politics over the summer. Things are about to change, I think, a little bit. Vertlos's Beton Gold. What's this all about?
This is actually from the Austrian Broadcasting Corporation, so the official mainstream state news, with the big I logo.
Mm-hmm.
This is an interesting investigation because they explain how certain apps have recently become popular, which allow for crowdfunding of construction projects. However, due to the recent downturn in economic boom for construction, here it is explained very well in this graphic. You have a certain amount of money that you need, and then you get the rest from the bank. And since they upped the minimum capital requirements after the banking crisis of 2008, the construction project companies, there's always separate entity companies created just for the construction of a building. I'm pretty sure Trump did similar things, which is why he was able to go bankrupt so many times with these organizations.
Yeah,
because
limited liability companies. Yeah,
exactly. They're detached from the holding or whatever else. However, so it is nice as long as it works, and the small-time investors can make, I think the offers are about 7-8%. However, if there's any issue with the project, let us not assume there's anything nefarious. So whether there is or whether it's just economic downturn, the project has to be sold, the land has to be sold, or something along those lines. It's of course always very shady with all the subcontracting companies for construction itself. As far as I understand, it is quite possible to do all kinds of shady dealings through these multiple subcontractors, who then eventually may hire some workers from the east that you don't have to properly care for, pay less and all of that. So however, if there is any issue, the first to get their money back, of course, is the bank. And the crowdfund investors are in a set of investor class which is the least privileged within these deals. So it is very well possible then that if there is any issue at all with the project, all the crowdfunding investors, as you can see here, they get €0 or dollars back at all. Even though there technically would be some type of legal representation, the app claims, but that doesn't seem to be very effective. By now, according to this report, the app has stopped advertising these type of projects, but the individuals featured here basically show you that more than 50% of the projects they invested in basically went bankrupt. And they have no proper recourse. Of course, a small time investor also probably doesn't have the time or the funds for a more detailed legal analysis or any type of countermeasures. So they are kind of left holding the bag, which is empty in this case.
Swindled. Wow, that's crazy. Oh, crowdfunding. That's too bad because that could have been such a great way for crypto investments.
What's interesting here, one more thing I have to mention, this law actually was passed to even allow these kind of things, I believe about 10, 15 years ago. If I remember correctly, this was also pushed by an individual by the name of Heini Staudinger, who is a quite well-known entrepreneur in Austria. He even ran during the last presidential election without really big chances, and he took some, let's say, interesting eco health Gaia type positions in terms of wanting to speak for the environment and speak for the earth and things like that. But a nice guy from everything I know. And interesting because he has one, I believe there's only 2 remaining shoe factories in Austria. One of them is called Steinadler. They are supplying the Austrian military. And the other one, which Heini Staudinger ran, is or still is running, is called Waldviertler. And they are producing very decent shoes for an okay price. They are very durable and good quality. And I believe back then, for whatever reason, he needed more funding and he was giving out, I'm sure I wouldn't be using the right terms now, but some sort of instrument to allow his customers to support him. And there was some kind of big legal question and fights about this. It eventually got passed. However, it does, of course, not only allow very honest entrepreneurs that have high diligence and pay their workers well to access this type of crowdfunding, but it opened the door for any other businesses just as well. And legally, it wasn't limited to certain businesses. And this is where then this type of app came in, where eventually people were left holding the bag.
Yeah, I mean, we had some pretty bad real estate, bank manipulations as well in the West or in America, but it seems like something that they could have foreseen coming.
Yes, I would also think so. Yes.
The bank's like, okay, here's how we do this. Okay, and this is Kampf Kitzbühel.
We are still in East Styria, aka Austria. Kitzbühel is one of the most famous skiing spots, and even for 40 years, it has been known to be a prime tourist destination, especially for wealthy Austrians, wealthy Germans, and wealthy whoever that want to enjoy the Austrian mountains and see one of the most famous ski racings, which is held there every year. And of course, the issue you have is not only, or actually not some gentrification, which is an issue that many districts face in many big cities, but this is a small town village where technically, in order to have a residence, you would need to be, how do they call this? In German, they say Hauptwohnsitz. So this should be your main residence where you remain for at least 6 months in a year. However, just like this guy is pointing out, he's a neighbor of one recently constructed villa, and he can tell that the individuals are never really there, maybe a month during the year. And there is little that the local government does to prevent this. And I'm not sure if this is a topic that comes up here, whether to some extent they are profiting from it directly. Everyone, you can make your own assumptions whether they are, but they are basically not really enforcing the law they have, which again, unfortunately shows that even though there is a law, it is certainly not applied equally to everybody, which of course in turn drives up the prices for any local residents or any regular Austrians that for any reason may want to live there. And even in places that are deliberately built for regular people, it's also causing issues. And like I said, this has been going on, I believe, for 30, 40 years. and nobody seems to really care to correct the situations. So you have all the rich people either just for holidays buying a house or purely for speculation. Because of this snowballing effect, there's just investors moving in that build super fancy flats and houses that no regular individual could possibly afford.
But if they tell people that they can't own like that, if you have to live at a piece of property you own, it's kind of like saying you can't really own property because we can tell you what you do with your property. So
It's
it's
not
catch
that.
22.
It is the idea that you would have to live there as your main residence, which means staying there for about 6 months a year.
Yeah, but
However,
like think about that. So someone wants to buy a house and then, someone tells them you can't unless you're going to live here. So you're basically controlling what they do with their property and you're demanding on their life something. So it's complicated because do you have the right to do that for someone who's buying a piece of property? I get why you wouldn't want to let them do that because this eventually will end up with the houses going up and up and up until everyone moves out, even the rich people, and it's just completely destroyed and abandoned. That's what happens to places like that. But in 10 years or maybe 5 to 20 years, sometime, this is all kind of just collapsed. But still, isn't it their right to do that? I don't know. Individual rights versus social rights. It's a hard one. How about legal cannabis?
yeah, this is something I may have mentioned on a previous show about a legal situation where a local CBD shop, because in Austria only CBD is legal, and currently it is legal to sell cannabis with a THC content below 0.3%, whereas I know through a friend only certain companies actually are adhering to. Not that they deliberately want to put it higher, but you have to really grow it properly and treat the plants in a proper way to actually get this type of content without any synthetic or artificial intervention. In any case, due to a legal proceeding, one of the sellers from one of these shops basically, I think, wanted to declare the cannabis he's selling as a smokable product, and then the judge who was responsible looked at it and said, oh, well, certainly this can be a smokable product. However, then, according to the judge's interpretation, it has to adhere to the tobacco monopoly law. And this means two things. Number one, that there is a particular tax put upon it. And number two, that it can only be sold by authorized shops, which in Austria are called Trafik, like traffic, interestingly enough. Um, and because the judge ruled that, and even the insane government went to enforce it, so they literally went around looking at CBD shops and checking them whether they are still selling anything, because during that time, technically, legally, they would not be allowed to sell it. So it cost a huge amount of money. It made huge losses and issues for the by now established CBD and related shops in Austria. However, now these shops banded together and got the most renowned legal sage in Austria by the name of Heinz Meyer to do a report. And the report basically states, while yes, it is a smokable product and the rule to apply the taxes is valid, the rule to only have it in authorized shops is invalid. So now I have to check actually on the sites, but now it seems again they are able to legally sell it. So this is Austrian bureaucracy and legal system for you, that it took them about 6 months to have this crazy situation, but rather than saying, oh, it's not exactly clear, let's wait and properly validate everything, they even sent out, I was about to use another word, police or whatever else to harass these shop owners who were selling something completely legal, but just in a questionable in between state during that time. But yeah, it
Well,
seems it has been resolved.
interesting.
partially, but you're gonna get taxes. So this was probably anyhow the desired result to make sure you can tax it.
That's what I
with
mean. Like, it's
20,
gonna
30,
be
40%.
That's literally what's coming. It's already here in California and Colorado. It's going to be in Austria too. They just want to figure out how to make the money, but also control who's making the money to begin with. All right, so the final experiment. Now we're on to Earth Shape, the official trailer for the McToon.
Here we are. So 5 months after this expedition to Antarctica,
Now you
they
can buy
will
the DVD.
they will present their documentary, which will be positioned in such a way to make any investigation into the Earth shape, which does not blindly validate the NASA globe model, to look insane and ridiculous, as
Nice.
expected. Here we go. If anybody's interested in this, just go through the links on my website for the previous shows. Always on the Earth shape section, you can find a few different videos, either relating to this particular project or to actual researchers, I want to say.
Freaking nuts. Okay. And then the Masonic passport, eh? That looks fun.
This, of course, I really wish there would be a clear-cut case. As we've shown before, the main individual promoting this by the name of Will Duffy has this, Agape Kingdom Church where almost nobody is attending. He's become a millionaire at the age of 33. He has 3, 4, or 5 about that cases with the FTC as a financial advisor where he's being asked to pay damages. Some people claim, or he claims, this is perfectly normal. Other people claim this is not very normal. He has the most interesting backstory with the former pastor of this church called Bob Enyart. Anybody interested, again, check out the older shows, check out these sections. Here we have a very particular instance taken from an interview. And I'm not even saying this proves anything, but it is highly interesting. Here the video shows that so many individuals officially involved with Antarctic expeditions have been Freemasons. And the main point here is an excerpt from a live stream he did maybe a year ago or 9 months ago, where Duffy is being asked, and you may know this term, supposedly by a random chatter, he's being asked, "Oh, are you a traveling man?" And
Really?
he says, "Yes, I am a traveling man."
Interesting. Yes. Really?
And traveling man basically refers to the idea that if you are somewhere which is not your home and you are a Freemason, you could be asked that question in order to be identified as a Freemason and then ideally be offered to stay at the local lodge, which I find, I want to say, kind of cute and also funny. It's like an international free hostel service on that end of it. If it were only that, I would be all for it. However, of course, as always, with the obfuscation and the misrepresentation and all of these things, not the biggest fan.
God. So he said, yeah. What did he say, though? What was his response?
Maybe scroll through, and somewhere you should see the live stream excerpt. I'll see if I find it myself.
At the very beginning there, or in the tent?
I'm checking.
Okay.
Go to second 8 and just play for 10 seconds, please.
Got second 8? Okay, let me
Yes.
also get audio on there for it. Is that right or no? This is the wrong one.
I didn't say it, Mythoclast. Thank you. And everyone enjoy the Viennese sunrise.
Know your realm, says Will. Are you a traveling man?
I'm a traveling man.
I want to bring this up.
All right.
Which is just someone who likes to travel, please.
That's all that means, man. Yeah. Oh man, he says it's so cold, like so dead face. That was just kind of intense. He's, okay. All right then. Base Kothar sends $10 as well as brain time. I think, or is it brain compass? Is it a compass? Maybe he's like, we're aiming the brain, which is also very kind
And
of
here
you.
you see when I saw it, I was about to do this, and then I was about to do this sign, just again reinforcing the idea you cannot use any common expression or any common hand gesture that is not in some way, shape, or form related to the New World Order.
What are you gonna do, right? And then this is Malenko Late Night
This is
with Dave Murphy.
an interesting interview I still have to check out in detail. He's mainly talking about how the planes are moving. So just because I wanted to put something else there, people can check it out. I can't say much about it because I haven't seen the whole thing yet. But it's always interesting to listen to someone, especially maybe some people that are not so well known, and just listen to their thoughts on the topic. But I believe 1 or 2 shows previous, on that section, I pulled a link where you actually have interviews or just random footage of various pilots, and they say at least they are flying as if it's flat, because of course it's about ascending and descending. How do you have to move your plane? And if there was a constant or even irregular fall off, you would have to adjust, unless there is some type of super magnet in the plane that makes it stick to it, and it automatically does that, which doesn't really make sense to me, but people can check it out.
Interesting. Malenko, okay. And then Bro Sanchez TV debunked female crew. Well, that's just rude.
Oh, just briefly, I like Stefan's comment here. Traveler is a cognate of chevalier, which is PC old speak. I think this is a word we can say for Romani or gypsy. However, I highly doubt that Will Duffy is declaring himself to be a gypsy.
Yeah. Pretty sure his I statement, the way he said it too, like, yes, I am a traveling man. It's just too good. Okay. So, but here's also female pilots in a giant phallus created by Jeff Bezos going around.
Yes, Bro Sanchez here, he sometimes talks about this topic. He's mainly talking about the questions surrounding the G-force and the equipment being used, and how exactly it is possible that you have completely untrained individuals supposedly being affected by such high G-forces, and, well, all they do is sing songs, show you a daisy, show you a butterfly paper cut,
The butterfly
and
was
talk
good, yeah.
about how emotionally amazing whatever it is.
It was emotionally amazing. Yeah.
I mean,
It felt so amazing. Yeah, I'm sure that the G-force felt really amazing.
but the G-force was no problem because, as you can see here, they had the specially designed seats, and that was supposedly the reason why they had no issue whatsoever, even though they have zero training. And it's also pointed out in the video that individuals doing drift racing or things like that, they need to train their neck all the time and all of these things. And in the official history, from what I understand, these individuals have not really undergone any training whatsoever. And also, as you could see with the windows, the view is supremely crisp. It could not possibly be an animation, right?
Looking totally believable.
And also, everyone who wants to check it out, you can look at the Chinese missions, because apparently quite often in the Chinese missions, strangely enough, even though they're also supposedly up in the air, maybe they are or they're not, but quite a few times, for a strange reason, you cannot see the curve as clearly or at all as you can see in this example. Make up your own minds about it.
Oh my god, all these hearts. Okay. And then so now we're gonna get to section 2, which is restricted. So everybody switch over to Rumble.
Yes, please
We'll
switch over to Rumble.
We'll listen to a
We're
song
gonna, yes,
to transition
turn it
you
up.
into that. Do you have which one did you want to play?
Oh, anything. Let's just go with this one.
Go on now. Get on out of here. Get on Rumble.
Yes, everyone, below we have the links to all of Andreas's channels, including Rumble. You can also, oh yeah, important. If you don't like Rumble for any reason, and also, I'm going to turn this down a little bit, you don't like ads, which I can completely understand. I've heard there are various plugins which are still working, especially if you use something like Waterfox or Chromium. You can go on Rumble, where you may or may not have ads, and what you can always do is you can go on Odyssey Live, which has no ads now whatsoever, from what I understand, if I remember this correctly. So that's always where you can enjoy the live stream without ads, and then just come on YouTube if you want, or keep the tab open if you want to comment. Not a problem at all, because we can see Odyssey comments. All right, everyone get over there, and we'll catch you in a second.